What's up, adventurers? My name's ShawnSetGO, and today we're going to be talking about what I think is the reason that we have had such poor hero releases recently in AFK Journey, starting with Ludovic, and also leading into characters like Talin, as well as Olmus. Now, I know a lot of the people that have been pulling for these characters. I don't want you to make you feel like you've made poor choices. Pull for what you pull for. Whether you're competitive or not is not my concern. But simply put, across the board, we get a regular stream of content creators who are releasing content along a few lines, basically saying, is this character good at one copy? Is this character good at Supreme Plus? And then normally the answer being they're good at Supreme Plus, but there's other characters who are better. Or they're not really good in most game modes, but they're good in PvP is usually the case. Or something along the lines of, while I'm not personally pulling for this character, you should still get it because having a character is better than not having a character. And it's just like this constant, like this excuses mentality where it's like it's just excusing very like a justification for very poor character releases. And so starting with a character like Ludovic, I realized that a lot of these characters that have been released recently aren't really that great because they're hybrid characters. And now hybrid characters is nothing new to AFK Journey. There are characters who are hybrids just by their nature. Some fantastic examples being characters like Rowan and also characters like Damien who really provide a little bit of versatility to the battlefield. And so I don't think hybrids are bad outright, but I think the way they've been building these hybrid characters recently, it almost makes it to where they don't belong to the class that they've been meant to be released for. So starting with Ludovic, I realized that there was a lot of strong parallelisms, things that were similar to a character like Smokey and Mirky. And so with a character like Smokey and Mirky, instead of having his channeling effects, Ludovic will have rings, but they deplete over time. So it's kind of a one-to-one. If you were to compare the two, you could say that whereas Smokey and Mirky's lacks in PvP because his cannot be moved, Ludovic's is similar to that in that similar to his healing style, but can be moved. However, his depletes over time. So you're waving like depletes over time versus constant heals, but may not have the range for it. So for me personally, because I already have a character like Smokey and Mirky, and while I don't have him built to the moon and back, I know that eventually his range does improve. And on top of that, while he may not be the greatest in PvP situations, he's good in almost every other situation. So I would rather use him because he gives haste, he gives energy buffs, he gives attack buffs, and he improves his own attack, which inevitably improves his own heals, as well as his team in the very end of that. And I think that provides more benefits to not only short-term healing, but long-term healing with things like his additional Withering Potion, which does 12% damage. So those long sustained battles, he provides more utility as a support than Ludovic does as a damage dealer, because that's the main thing he does. Is with his blooms, he can also deal damage, so he can basically absorb to restore his own blooms, but that has to be at the enemy's cost. So more damage has to be done for his healing to do more, whereas Smokey and Mirky doesn't have that requirement. And the same thing with Ephemeral Berries. So Ephemeral Berries requires that his blooms be used more often. So more damage being done and being absorbed by blooms, by more damage being done by your team to the enemy. So it's not damage done to you and sustaining you, it's damage on top of damage. So like his is a support slash damage dealer, and I think because of it, he suffers as a support because of that mixed class sort of behaviors. Similarly, you have a character like Talin. Talin, while her class is built around being a mage, she also kind of mixes into being a support and healing, as well as be like protection. So like a little bit of like a tank in a way. So hers being split amongst 3 classes, despite being a celestial, I would argue her kit oddly matches a character like Viperion, who is also a mage, but uses all of that sustain and healing to make sure his damage happens more often, is dealt more often, and use all that protection that he gets in order to increase his damage. Something like Crimson Waltz, which basically, if his health is above a certain threshold, he deals 420% damage, which is an insane amount of damage. And then Enhanced Force, which where he gets, if enemies are defeated, he gains healing and energy for each Viper that has possessed an enemy while it's killed. So Talene splits hers out to other people, and because of it, I think she suffers as a mage, and her damage is less overall. So what's another comparison that we can make? I think another recent release that's come out is Olmus. Olmus, a lot of people are realizing the benefits to them as PvP characters. For example, his having a knockback as well. Into their builds, it's later into the build, but I can understand where people are coming from saying these are useful in PvP, but is that really how we're weighing things nowadays, to where like PvP is the only thing that matters? There's so many more game modes in this game that actually matter, and these characters are hybrids, but they're so single dimensional in how they can be used, because you have to build teams around them in order for them to work. And so Olmus, while he has damage dealing on top of being a tank, which arguably I don't think a tank necessarily needs. I think a tank being a damage dealer basically makes them a warrior, because warriors have a little bit of sustain but are mostly focused on damage, whereas a tank is mostly focused on damage absorption, and then dealing a little bit of damage here and there is normal. I think even a character that I would compare him to, which is Granny Donnie, even her, she has thorns damage, but her thorns damage is because it's a response to getting dealt damage. So the more damage the enemies do to your Granny Donnie, the more thorns that she's going to deal out to other people. And so I would argue that with hers, having debuff features, having damage absorption features, having taunt features, and ally saves is much more important to have on the field on a tank than somebody who drops back into the middle of a fight, endangering the rest of your team, and then dealing not really enough damage, but really just capitalizing on damage already being dealt. And that's kind of how a lot of these characters really fall in this game, which is they're hybrid characters that don't really contribute enough in their main class or in the class that they're trying to do to be either. And so you end up having to supplement them with other single class characters, or build a whole team around them in order for them to be useful. And so I would argue that there needs to be a very thorough, strict reworking with a lot of these classes, because if you compare these characters, if you compare Talene to Viperion, Granny to Olmus, and Ludovic to Smokey and Mirky, I promise you, you are going to see so many parallels in the, don't look at, not necessarily the numbers, but what each ability achieves. There's so many parallels between these characters. It's basically like they said, here, copy and paste this, and then add a PvP talent at the end of it. And all they did is they put a passive and active with almost every ability. That way it has kind of 2 moves built in one, so they could have a little bit more abilities packed into the whole thing. And they put these strong PvP abilities at the end of them, because who's playing PvP the most? The paid players. And so it becomes this thing of, it almost seems predatory that we're getting these characters because we're not getting an additional benefit from having these characters like at one copy. We're getting benefits at PvP levels at the end of these builds. And if you're not a paid player who's able to get up these characters to high levels, now you could say like, oh yeah, A levels, S levels are easy to get up to high classes, maybe not Celestials and Hypogeans, but if you're choosing and picking and choosing at this point, if you've played for any degree of amount of time, why would you change over from a character like Smokey and Mirky then all of a sudden do Ludovic? My argument would be maybe you would only do it if you're really trying to push for tower, because Niru's not the best healer for Graveborn. So there's very situational circumstances, but if you're thinking max output from a character, you're still going to invest into these single class characters who are built only into the class that they are classified as, and not as these hybrid classes that are spread so thin that they're not really useful across the board. Now, I don't want to say these characters are bad. I do, like I said before, I think these characters do perform at range, but I've been watching a lot of people, and I'm kind of getting tired of these videos where it's like, here's the meta build. It's like, no, I'll still 9 times out of 10 get a meta output from the original characters versus these new characters. And my honest fix with these is that these hybrid characters need to have something to where if we're locking them into a game, especially PvP, I think we need to kind of sort of like League of Legends. This is going to be a strange comparison, I promise. It's going to have a point though. I think what we need to do is we need to allow for players to level certain abilities so we can choose how much we want to lean into certain abilities. And this is something that we can reset and change over time. Let me explain. If you have a character like Almas who has an ultimate and say you want to invest heavily into this because you want to build your character around this particular ability, you should be able to level up this ability sort of like you do your legendary focus, how you voluntarily do that, and then level up the certain abilities you want to do the most. And then this can tell or inform the devs, okay, this ability is not performing like we want to. People are not investing into this ability. Let's change it to where we're getting more output and useful and synergy from this class with other teams maybe, so we can see what's being useful. I think that would improve how these hybrid classes work, because right now it seems like you're having to pick one or the other. You're either picking the damage side of these hybrid classes, so they invest into their damage portion, into the support portion, but not really their main side, because at best, Almas is an off tank. At best, someone like Talene is like a sub DPS, and at best, someone like Ludovic is an off like an off healer, sort of like how Coco would be. Like that would fit in that same sort of property where it's like so. I want it to be clear that these characters, they're not bad as a concept. I just think sort of like if you ever played Classic WoW, I think AFK Journey struggles to build these hybrid characters well. So that being said, that's all I wanted to mention. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope this opened your eyes a bit. My last bit recommendation that I'll mention is that if you're looking to invest in these characters and you've already had, time invested into Smokey and Mirky, characters like Granny, characters like Viperian, I'd recommend just sticking with those. It's not every day that these characters come out, of course. We can't always invest into every character out there, but I'd highly recommend, especially if you're free to play, there's no real purpose in investing in these new characters. They already exist in the game to some degree. So hope you enjoyed the video. Give the video a like, subscribe to the video, comment with maybe some of the characters that you do like as hybrids and what you like about them. And as per usual, check us out in the Discord. We're constantly talking about gacha games in there. Currently, I'm playing Honkai Star Rail, Zenless Zone Zero, Weathering Waves, and then I play this in the passing as well. So that's all I got though. Hope to catch you in the next one, and as always, may fortune favor your journey. Peace.